Hello and welcome to another Path of Exile beta patch note video. In this video we're going to be covering patch 0.9.5 A, B, C and D. Now these patches were pretty huge, more so patch 0.9.5 A. There were a ton of changes here and I'm pretty sure a lot of you are quite keen to see what exactly is going on. So let's have a look. I will mention that this patch did come out a couple of days ago and I've been enjoying it thoroughly. So first up, they have wiped all the characters' passive skills once again. You may already know that if you did watch my most recent Path of Exile playthrough video, but along with that they've also moved all the old characters and items to Legacy Leagues. Now as I mentioned in that video, this doesn't really change very much, but they are interested in balancing the economy and getting feedback from the new leagues and the new characters that have been created and that are playing through the game as it is right now in 0.9.5. So because of that, they put those older characters in the Legacy League so the stats don't get mixed up. It's pretty simple and I gotta say it's probably the right thing to do. So then next up, as we're going to be discussing in just a few moments, they've changed how flasks work and they recover life and or mana a lot slower than before now. I have yet to really notice this myself, but I am playing a pretty tanked up Marauder, so I suppose it wouldn't affect me quite as much. But moving along, in the features and content additions, they've added the ability to refund individual skill points on the passive tree by spending passive skill respec points. These can be gained from quest rewards or by using a rare currency item. That's pretty cool and I like the fact that they're not making respecing too easy. Next, there's a new quest called the Golden Hand in the Church Dungeon. This currently gives 2 skill respec points per difficulty as its reward, but this will probably change in the future. I'll definitely check that out when I get there. There are 2 new world areas. Currently they're called the Ancient Pyramid and the Old Fields Cave. The number of unique items in the game has been more than doubled. They've added some new monster types which can be found towards the end of Act 2, and I do like that they didn't spoil this for us. I have yet to see what they are, so I can't wait for that. They've also added a new unique monster to the rocky climb called Iron Point the Forsaken. And here, probably one of the biggest changes, they have added new currency items, improved vendors, and added the ability to sell items to vendors. We are going to talk about this and cover it in full in just a little while though, so keep watching. I will also just mention right now that I am skipping 1 or 2 of the smaller changes and additions here because they're not really worth talking about. But moving right along, they have improved the character selection or creation screen yet again. Now they've added the Quartermaster to its background. It is indeed starting to look quite snazzy. The waypoint in the submerged passage level 2 has been removed and a new waypoint has been added to the rocky climb. The next is one thing that I definitely noticed myself. They added dividers between the NPC talk items such as shops, quests and other general information. Then last up in this section, the new strength skill Lightning Strike has been moved to a future patch because of a few issues that occurred during testing. Now we're moving on to the currency and vendor changes, and here's one of my favorite additions. They've added a new currency item called the Orb of Regret, and yes, I really like the name here. This grants 1 passive skill refund point when used. Another new currency item is the Blessed Orb. This one rerolls the value of an implicit built-in mod on an item. After that, there were a few changes to the vendors themselves. They now sell currency items as well, and it seems like both Scrolls of Wisdom and Scrolls of Town Portal are slightly more rare. Now here's the big one that I spoke about before. They have added the ability to sell items to vendors. The vendors have many complex recipes for combinations of items that they accept, so they encourage experimentation. Selling items works in a very interesting way, sort of like a Herodric or Nephilim cube would work in Diablo, and when you place items in the sell window and actually sell them, and this is totally different every single time or with every single item, then you get different shards or fragments back, and when you combine these shards, fragments or other smaller items, then you get the bigger currency items that you can actually use. I'm actually super impressed by the fact that they made this work. I didn't expect it to turn out as well as it did. You can obviously experiment a lot with this trading or bartering system, and I think it's great fun. I think it really suits the style of Path of Exile, and it's a very nice change from all the other games out there that just stick with gold. Anyway, moving along, they've added Scroll of Wisdom fragments, Transmutation shards, Alteration shards, and Alchemy shards currency items. These can only be obtained from vendors, and that's exactly how I explained it before. They give you these shards or fragments, and you can turn them into the bigger items. Now the stack size depends on the item, so some of them require 20 to make a complete item, and some of them only require 5 or 7 or slightly lower numbers. Then they've implemented mod pricing for selling identified, blue or rare items to the vendors. Different types of mods on your items can yield different numbers of shards, and many of them are worth very little indeed. But there are some that can get you quite a nice price. They've added new art for most of the currency items in the game, and they've renamed some of them too. Chaos Spheres are now Chaos Orbs. Orb of Transformation is now the Orb of Alteration. The Gem Quality upgrade has become the Gem Cutter's Prism. Flask Quality upgrade has become the Glass Blower's Bauble. Armor Shard becomes the Armorer's Scrap. Whetstone has become the Blacksmith's Whetstone. So yes, I'd say they are a little easier to identify now. But moving right along, there were a couple of item drop changes too. They've reduced the drop rate of Orbs of Scouring, Scrolls of Wisdom and Portal Scrolls, as I mentioned before. They do mention that the scrolls can easily be obtained from vendors now. They've increased the drop rate on Orb of Chance, and they're now biasing towards the higher item base types extremely strongly for most item types. This means that it's much easier to stay up to date with the current highest item type for each slot. For example, if a bow drops in the Maelstrom of Chaos, there's a around 40% chance that it will be a level 58 bow. Then magic, rare and unique monsters can now drop currency items and skill gems again, at an adjusted fair rate. Their chance of dropping these items is higher than that of normal monsters though, so that's a good thing. Then lastly in this section, they've changed how unique items are generated so that low level uniques can still drop in high level areas. Now in the general balance section, they've changed how flasks heal your life and mana so that they are slower than before, but heal substantially more in total. They also take more monster kills to refill now. This change should make your life and mana totals more relevant than just the speed that your flasks recover at, and I think that's a good change, so the focus is more on your character instead of the items you have. There are apparently more drastic flask changes scheduled for 0.9.6, but they're interested in feedback on these ones first. Higher difficulties have been made harder, and they have removed the 10% damage bonus that monsters get per additional party member. So now there are a couple of extra changes, fixes, and additions in the general balance, active skill balance, and passive skill balance sections, and there are a bunch of bug fixes to have a look at as well. But honestly, I think that those changes are not really all worth talking about. You can obviously find the full patch notes link below, so you can check those out and browse them at your own leisure. So now before finishing this off, we're going to have a quick look at patch 0.9.5 B, C, D, and E. In B, they increased the drop rate on Scrolls of Wisdom by 50%. They added some more vendor recipes that allow you to get Scrolls of Wisdom for low currency items, and there were a couple of bug fixes too. In C, they slightly reduced the monster life on higher difficulties. They increased the amount of mana gained per level from 2 to 4. They increased the natural mana regeneration rate for players by 24%. And lastly, they increased the value of early mana regeneration passive skills from 25% to 40%. So the casters probably liked this one. Then in D, there was actually quite a bit more. They reset the passive skills yet again because of changes to the passive skill tree. In the balance changes here, they improved damage of all spells. Yes, straight up. Then they just balanced a couple of skills. They reduced the drop rate of Orbs of Regret. They reduced the price of flasks at vendors. And they improved the sell value of many mods on identified items. They doubled the yield of the vendor recipe that gives you a Scroll of Wisdom for low currency. And they added the ability to trade one Portal Scroll to receive one Scroll of Wisdom. So that's quite cool, and I would say a pretty decent trade. In the passive skill balance section of patch 0.9.5D, they added occasional named notable passives which support core builds. Less popular passive tree areas have been reduced in number, consolidated, and improved. You can read specifics on this below. They added the Master of Wands passive, which provides a 50% physical damage increase for wands. That's quite a lot. Then, as you can see on your screens right now, there were a couple of other changes to the passive skill tree here. Most of them pretty minor, but I suppose if you add them all together, it makes quite a big difference. Last up, we have Path of Exile version 0.9.5E. In this, they added 5 new monster mods. They added new waterfall cave monsters to the Maelstrom of Chaos. They fixed a couple of bugs, and that's pretty much it. That's all there is in the patch notes. Be sure to check back here soon for more Path of Exile content, and if you are interested in reading more about these patches, you can do so in the description below this video. Most importantly though, happy patch 0.9.5. And selling items. Happy that too.